A nurse asked Michael Jackson one question before he died. His answer is still changing lives today. She was holding a clipboard, just doing her job. A routine check, vital signs, medication schedule. Nothing unusual. But then she stopped, and she asked him one question. Michael Jackson looked at her for a long moment. He didn't smile, he didn't perform, he just answered quietly. Honestly, she never told anyone what he said. Not for 15 years, until the day she finally did. And the world hasn't been the same since. June 19, Carolwood Drive, Los Angeles. Michael Jackson was 50 years old. Rehearsals for the This Is It tour had been running for weeks. 50 concerts, London. The O Arena, the biggest comeback in music history. But behind the gates of his rented Holmby Hills mansion, something else was happening. Something nobody was supposed to see. Her name was Linda Marsh. She was 4 years old, registered nurse, 2 years of experience. She had worked with terminal patients, addiction cases, psychiatric wards. She had seen things most people couldn't imagine. She was not easily shaken, but that was before June 19, before Carolwood Drive. Before the question, Linda had been assigned through a private medical staffing agency, confidential placement, high-gen profile client. She was told 3 things: be professional, be discreet, and do not speak to the press, ever. She signed papers. She showed up. She did her job. For 6 weeks, Linda monitored Michael Jackson every day. She took his blood pressure, she logged his sleep patterns, she tracked his weight, which had been dropping. She noted his anxiety levels. She wrote everything down in a private medical journal that no one else was allowed to touch. And in those 6 weeks, she saw something that the headlines never captured. She saw a man who was exhausted. Not tired, exhausted. Bone jan deep, soul jan deep. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. She saw a man who flinched when phones rang too loud, who sat for hours in a room full of people and still looked completely alone, who sometimes stood at the window and stared at nothing for so long that Linda would quietly check if he was still breathing. But she also saw something else. She saw what happened when children were near. It started on a Thursday afternoon. 3rd week of June, a colleague's daughter had come to drop off some paperwork. She was 7 years old, shy. She waited in the hallway while her mother spoke to one of the staff. Michael Jackson walked past. He stopped. He knelt down. He talked to that little girl for 11 minutes. Linda timed it. Not because she was curious, because it was her job to note any unusual change in his demeanor. What she noted was this. His hands stopped shaking. His breathing slowed. The tightness around his eyes, the one that had been there every single day, disappeared. For 11 minutes, he looked like a different person. Linda wrote in her journal, patient visibly calm, first time in 3 weeks. 2 days later, a charity organization called. They were asking if Michael would record a short video message for a children's hospital in London. One of the staff members said he was too tired, too busy, too close to the tour. Michael Jackson recorded the message himself, unannounced. 12 minutes long, he sat in front of a camera alone and spoke directly to sick children he had never met, in a hospital he had never visited, in a city he hadn't reached yet. Linda watched him do it from the doorway. When he finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he asked someone to make sure the hospital received it before the weekend. He said the kids needed to see it before the weekend. Linda didn't understand why the weekend specifically. She wrote it down anyway. The question happened on June T 4 days before he died. Linda had come in early, 2 a.m. Michael was already awake, which was unusual. He was sitting in a chair by the window. The room was dim. Outside, the city was just starting to light up. She did what she always did: blood pressure, temperature, medication check. She wrote everything down, and then she stopped. She didn't plan what happened next. She would say that later, in every interview, in every account she gave. She didn't plan it. It just came out. She looked at him, this man who had sold 400 million records, who had moonwalked on television for 1 billion people, who had a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award and a Wikipedia page longer than most encyclopedias. And she asked him one question. She asked him what he was most proud of. Not the music, not the tours, not the awards. Just, what are you most proud of? Michael Jackson turned from the window. He looked at her for a long moment. His expression didn't change. He didn't perform. He didn't give her the answer a publicist would have written. He said one thing quietly, and then he turned back to the window. Linda stood very still. She looked down at her clipboard. She wrote 2 words in her journal, circled them, and said nothing. She left the room 30 minutes later. 4 days later, on the 25th of June, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. Linda Marsh did not speak publicly for 15 years. She went back to nursing. Different hospitals, quieter work. She moved out of Los Angeles in 2011. She took a position at a pediatric clinic in rural Tennessee. Small town, long hours, low pay. She said in a later interview that she chose it on purpose. She kept the medical journal locked in a box under her bed. In 2024, a journalist named Rachel Okafor was working on a documentary about the last months of Michael Jackson's life. She had interviewed 14 people connected to Carolwood Drive: managers, assistants, security, chefs. She was looking for one more source, someone closer to the medical side. A mutual contact gave her Linda's number. Rachel called. Linda didn't answer. Rachel left a voicemail. Linda didn't call back. Rachel drove to Tennessee. She knocked on Linda's door. Linda opened it, looked at the journalist standing on her porch, looked at her for a long time. Then she stepped aside and let her in. The interview lasted 4 hours. Linda had never told anyone what happened at Carolwood Drive, not her husband, not her sister, not the friends who asked. For 15 years she had kept it entirely to herself. She explained why. She said Michael Jackson had never asked her for silence. There was no legal requirement. She had signed a general NDA, yes, but she had been told by her own attorney years later that it had long expired. She kept quiet because of what she had witnessed. Not the death, the life. She said the man she had watched for 6 weeks was nothing like the tabloid version. He was quiet where the headlines said he was erratic. He was gentle where the stories said he was strange. He was deeply, achingly aware of other people's pain in a way that Linda, after 22 years of nursing, said she had rarely seen in anyone. And then Rachel asked her about the question. Linda was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands. She said he told her the thing he was most proud of had nothing to do with music. It had nothing to do with records sold or concerts performed or awards won. He said he was most proud of the children. Nobody else noticed. The ones in the back of the crowd, the ones in the hospital rooms with no visitors, the ones who wrote letters that nobody answered. He said he had tried, for most of his adult life, to make sure those children knew that someone saw them, that someone stopped, that someone cared enough to kneel down and look them in the eye and say, "You matter." He said he didn't know if it had worked. He said he hoped it had. Linda looked at the journalist. Her voice was steady. She said she had written 2 words in her journal that morning. She still had the journal. She went and got it. She opened it to the 21st of June, 2009, and she showed Rachel Okafor what she had written. 2 words, circled in blue ink. The invisible. Rachel spent 3 more days in Tennessee. She didn't plan to, but Linda kept remembering things, small things, the kind of details that don't make it into official accounts, but that tell you everything about a person. She told Rachel about the letters every week. A staff member would bring Michael a selection of fan mail, a curated pile. The team filtered thousands of letters down to a manageable number, mostly from adult fans, mostly congratulatory. But Michael had made one specific request. He wanted to see the letters from children who were sick, letters from hospitals, letters from group homes, letters written in crayon and shaky handwriting and misspelled words. He read every single one of them personally. Linda had seen him do it. She had walked in one afternoon to find him at a desk surrounded by papers. She assumed it was tour business. Then she saw what he was actually reading. A letter from a 12-year-old girl in a hospital in São Paulo. Written in broken English, 3 pages. A small sun drawn in the corner of the last page. Michael was writing back. By hand, on plain white paper with no letterhead. Linda left without disturbing him. She told Rachel she never found out if the girl in São Paulo received the letter. She thought about it sometimes, still. Linda also told Rachel about the phone calls. There was one afternoon, a week before he died, When Michael had asked a staff member to connect him with a children's ward at Cedars Sinai Medical Center. Not for a publicity visit, not for press. Just a phone call. He wanted to speak to the nurses directly and ask what the children on the ward needed most that week. Not in general that specific week. The staff member thought it was unusual, made the call anyway. The nurses on the ward were so caught off guard they didn't know what to say. They hadn't been asked that question before. Not like that. Not by someone who clearly intended to do something about the answer. They said the kids needed art supplies. The activity room had run out. Budget cuts. 3 days later, a delivery arrived at Cedars Sinai. No card, no name, just boxes. Enough art supplies to fill the activity room twice over. Paints, canvases, colored pencils, sketchbooks. The hospital administrator tried to trace the donation. The shipping label listed a logistics company. The logistics company listed a private purchasing agent. The purchasing agent listed a trust. The trust was anonymous. No one officially confirmed where it came from. But Linda knew. She had been in the room when the phone call was made. She had watched him listen to the answer. She had seen him write something down. That was the part, she told Rachel, that she had carried with her for 15 years. Not the fame, not the music, the writing it down, the making sure he didn't forget. Rachel's documentary aired in March 2024. It was watched by 11 million people in its first week, but the story didn't stop there. Because of that documentary, a children's hospital in Birmingham, England came forward. They had received a video message from Michael Jackson in June 2009, 12 minutes long. They had played it for their patients every year since his death. They had never told the press. They thought it was private. The hospital released the video. It spread everywhere within 48 hours. In the video, Michael Jackson speaks directly to children who are sick and scared and far from home. He tells them they are not invisible. He tells them that someone somewhere is thinking about them specifically. He tells them that the world needs them to get better. Not for any particular reason. Just because they are in it. A pediatric oncologist in Chicago named Dr. Sarah Mendez watched the video with 3 of her patients. She said all 3 children, ages 6, 9, and 11, asked to watch it again immediately. She said the 9-year-old, a boy named Eli who had not spoken in 4 days, said one word after the second viewing. He said okay. Dr. Mendez called it the most significant breakthrough in Eli's treatment. She said she started using the video in her practice. She shared it with colleagues. Within 6 months, 17 pediatric wards across the United States and the United Kingdom had incorporated it into their patient support programs. A formal study was launched. The results, published in a medical journal in late 2024, showed measurable improvements in emotional responsiveness in pediatric patients who watched the video as part of their care routine. Linda Marsh still works at the clinic in Tennessee. She was asked, after the documentary, if she regretted waiting 15 years to tell her story. She said no. She said she waited because it wasn't her story to tell. It was his. And she wanted to make sure she told it right. She was asked one more thing. She was asked what she thought about the answer he gave her that morning, the invisible children, whether she believed him. Linda looked at the interviewer for a long moment. She said she believed him from the first second. She said she had watched him for 6 weeks. She had seen what happened when a 7-year-old girl stood in a hallway. She had timed it. 11 minutes. Hands stopped shaking. She said a person can perform many things. A person cannot perform that today. The 12-minute video is archived by the Michael Jackson estate as one of his most significant personal recordings. The Birmingham Hospital has named a room in their pediatric wing after the video. They call it the "Someone Sees You Room Inside." There is a single framed photograph, Michael Jackson, kneeling eye level with a child. His white glove touching a small hand. Below the photograph, one line. He asked what he was most proud of, he said. The ones nobody else noticed. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not invisible. Turn on notifications, because there are more stories like this, and every single one of them deserves to be told.